Welcome, Shannon.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I apologize. The meeting invite wasn't coming through, and so we had to do it the old school way and just type in numbers. And so it just took a while to get that figured out. So for some reason my computer didn't like the link. So and normally I will upload my book, and just with all the technical difficulties, but I have it here. So I'm gonna unblur, and then you get to see my my home office. It's just I'm right by this door, so I apologize. I'm gonna unblur, and I'm gonna start by reading my book, and there we go. Just to give you context, and so hopefully everybody can see that okay. And I'll go slow so everyone can see the pictures. I had a fabulous illustrator, Scott Monaco. And so I want you to see all of his great artwork. So the name of the book is Bumped His Head and Went to Bed. And we start right here, and I'll just read it to you. So just like a bedtime story, right? So it starts like this. When Greg the Great was young, he played outside all day. Rough and tumble sports were his favorite games to play. He loved his dog named Prince. He took him hunting every fall. He played hard in backyard football with no helmet on at all. When Greg the Great got older, he worked diligently at his studies while growing bigger than his parents and most of his buddies. Greg the Great played so much football, he got the nickname Boz. He loved his team, he loved to tackle, he loved the cheering and the applause. He played defense, he played offense, he tackled and he trained. He bumped his head and went to bed. He didn't know he broke his brain. After college and football, he met a girl and it was time. They had a purple wedding and everything was fine. Greg the Great became a dad, not a single boy, 3 girls. No more football, no more tackling, just princess games and ballet twirls. The girls were so much fun, he bought them all a horse. Greg the Great got in that saddle and was bumped right off, of course. So grown-up Greg the Great still loved to play and hunt and race. One day while riding his horse real fast, he crashed and landed on his face. All his head bumps, old and new, added up to 44. But this bonk was a big one. It broke his brain a whole lot more. So I don't know if there's a glare, but hopefully you can follow. So here's the part where things get weird. Greg started acting kind of strange. Greg the Great began to slow down. All those brain bonks made him change. When it started, no one noticed. He just sat a little slouchy. Eventually, he started feeling grumpy and super grouchy. Greg became quite forgetful. He was tired and often sad. He said, "I'm just so frustrated," while running scared and looking mad. Greg said and did some things that Greg the Great would never do. His brain just wasn't working right, but what nobody knew, brains are very delicate, so when they are bumped and bruised, the person who's attached to it feels broken and confused. Some don't know what's happening, some do, but hide it well. Broken brains need help fast. It's so important that you tell, and that if you can't tell, it's a balloon with his brain in there floating away. Tell someone and quickly go to a special concussion doctor. Don't wait, it's very dangerous. It could stay broken for forever. There's something you should know about a brain injury disaster. A broken brain can take away your happily ever after. So then we transition into kind of the educational portion of it. It says, "Are you okay or not? You think it's better left unsaid? If you're hurt, confused, or anxious, could it be you've hit your head? Let's do a little count of all your head bumps, old and new. Even small hits count and have a big impact on you. Be the hero of your story. If your own words can't explain, show this book to someone who can help find out what hurt your brain. And then there is a survey, kind of a little interactive thing where you can help yourself remember all the ways that you may have hurt your head and some symptoms that you may or may not know are associated. There's a timeline you can plot all of this on, and then some resources and what to do. And so then I'm going to go ahead and blur my background again so you can focus on what I'm saying. So the story was written as a way to talk to my granddaughter, and I have two now, but I had one at the time, about where Papa went. So everything in the book is true and accurate. Just a really, condensed version of what happened in our life and what we learned about brain injury from my husband's death and how it's helped others. And so the book was written for Charlie, and when she was 11 months when Greg died, and he had played football and did all the athletic things, and then grew up and started doing horse training, and our girls were involved in rodeo, and he started to do cowboy mounted shooting competitively and train horses. So when he started those activities, he started to fall again. You just get bumped off, and that's just, you get bucked off, and that's just the nature of the game and the sport. And he was very competitive and very athletic. And so if it wouldn't have been rodeo, it would have been something else for him. So the nature of head injuries, I learned and did not know at the time, even though Greg and I both had degrees in athletic training and exercise science, is that they have the immediate effects, but then they accumulate over time and then create a disease effect. And so if you've heard of the disease CTE, my first thought after finding out that head injuries may have contributed to his death, I started to try to find out, well, how do you get diagnosed for CTE? And the short answer is that you can't. You can't do that while you're alive. And if you're familiar with what the NFL players are being checked for after death, that's exactly the disease that Greg was found to have. So first, I'll tell you that, in case you weren't aware, that CTE, the symptoms of CTE run opposite, inverse to Alzheimer's. They're very similar, but they're opposite. So with Alzheimer's, you start with some memory problems, and slowly then the emotional problems start, and then, as you know, every memory unit is prepared to lock down patients with Alzheimer's as those stages advance, because they are a flight risk and they are volatile and they start to say bad words and treat people terribly. Well, CTE starts with those more volatile behaviors and the impulsivity and the irritability. And if people weather those stages, then it does mellow out and looks a little more like Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. So the problem is that when those initial stages start, it just looks like a midlife crisis, and it looks like behavioral issues. It looks like a personality change. It looks like substance abuse and a mental health crisis. And so it often ends relationships. It often ends families. It often affects employment status. And there's a big unraveling and a big breakdown of the personal life of the person who had CTE. And a lot of the times the development of CTE will start early in life and continue to accumulate during the athlete or the person's lifetime. And it's not just athletics that causes it. And then about 10 years after those repetitive head injuries stop, then the symptoms kind of start very, very slowly. So midlife is kind of a typical time for those symptoms to really, really start looking like a personality change. For a football player, because a football player is going to be done around age 25, and then around age 35 they might start to there's some indications that they could start to talk in their sleep, walk in their sleep, act out in their sleep. It's a REM disorder, REM associated disorder, and that's not with everyone. It's just, you know, one of the symptoms that could start. But in the 40s is when it looks like a midlife crisis or a mental health crisis. And the unfortunate thing is that they don't speak about it all the time, and they internalize it. They become terrified of what's going on in their head. And a lot of them end their life by suicide, which is how my husband died. And we did not know that the two things were associated. So had we not been given the information about the part that concussions play in that whole story, you know, we could be sitting here with a different scenario, with just a prevention, you know, a mental health prevention problem, crisis situation, or campaign, you know, with the suicide prevention. But what we've also come to find out is that any suicides that end a life impulsively and without those planning aspects should be questioned for head injury, because they're more likely to be frontal lobe associated with the impulsivity and the executive functions. So to reiterate that, a planned out suicide with the notes and the you know, the I want so and so to take my dog, and you know, all of those things. Here's the key to the thing, and here are the passwords to everything, and here's what you should do. Those they're saying are more likely to be involved with mental health issues. But if it's impulsive, it's more likely that it could be head injury associated. So then the decline that Greg had is one of the worst types, because he was found after death then to have stage 2 CTE, and which the lower the stage, the more volatile the symptoms, and the more visible and the more offensive the symptoms are. But he also had immediate TBI, so recent fresh injuries. And so, like the story says, he was riding his horse and he was at a competition, more specifically, and it was May 5th of 2018, and he was at a competition and came off his horse going about 30 miles an hour and hit headfirst in the dirt and was knocked out and face down in the dirt. A couple of friends that were at the competition were they were first responders, and one was an ER nurse, trauma nurse, and they identified immediately that he had a blunt force trauma injury to the head, took him to the emergency department, and then of course called me, and I was an hour away, so drove up there, and he had been released from the ER before I even got there. He was never the same after that, and it was 4 months later that he died by suicide. And those 4 months, from May to September 11th of 2018, were the most tumultuous years of our marriage. We were married 25 years, and it was not the man I married, and just the behaviors that were associated that we could see, that we now know was head injury related, are one thing, but going back and trying to solve that mystery and seeing others was another story. And those still sometimes we'll just say, we'll come up with things like, oh my goodness, I remember he was putting pepper on everything, and he didn't really even like spicy foods. But an indicator that maybe he had lost his sense of smell or taste, and we just didn't put it together. And there were things like he wasn't a drinker, and we found hidden bottles of alcohol after he died that were half drunk. And but I never smelled alcohol on his breath, so I'm not sure when he was drinking them. That's a really, really common indicator that head injury has, that there's self-medicating going on after head injuries. Is any increase in alcohol or drug use is really, really common. That substance use element of self-medicating after a head injury often just gets looked at as a new addiction. Um, but if it's caught, early, and it's identified to be part of that head injury picture, it's very, very empowering, and the person doesn't feel alone in that. And so I think, had I had the information, we could have had that conversation, and the things that were going on in Greg's head, it would have been great to say, you know what, it's not you, there's not a monster in your head. Um, it's brain injury, it's a bruise. And to look at a brain injury as a physical symptom rather than a mental health issue, the symptoms might look alike, but saying there's an actual physical reason for those symptoms is very empowering, and it's very very tangible. It's something that you can actually say, well, let's find out what the challenges are exactly, and let's get you some help, let's get you some therapies. And overall, I'm talking about those invisible symptoms, the ones that, it's not causing speech issues, it's not causing gait issues, stability, dizziness issues, where you can't stand up straight, or it's not, it's like, I'm extra tired, yes, I might be a little more confused, but I don't know why, I'm not thinking straight. And to verbalize those things would be great, but it seems typical that, I don't know, these Midwestern men, their theory is, let's just rub a little dirt on it, I'll be fine, shake it off. So some overwhelming fatigue. I know Greg personally, he was drinking a lot of pre-workout, and he worked out regularly anyway, but the pre-workout, it gives you a really big boost of caffeine. And I didn't see that as anything alarming, because he did go to the gym, but an increased need for caffeine, it was here now. What if I knew then what I know now? It was a compensation for that low energy that happens after brain injury. So what I've come to learn through the North Dakota Brain Injury Network is, and with all of our colleagues and as a resource facilitator, I've gotten to learn so much from even just the people that we do referrals for. And we have a place in town, Progressive Therapy Associates, and they are a staff of speech and language pathologists, and we refer to them regularly. And they were just explaining to me how they have so much success with recovery from that fatigue when a person comes to them with the brain injuries, and they're able to identify, here's where you're expending a lot of extra energy with your thought processes and with your just to function on a daily basis. Your brain has to work twice as hard, and so you're going to have to take breaks, and let's get some things organized so that you don't have to think so hard. And then once they get people on a routine and just simplify life, it really alleviates over half of the level, 50% of the fatigue, they said. So that was really encouraging, and that's a piece that I now can take to clients that I work with through the North Dakota Brain Injury Network. And so today I'm living the whole, if I knew then, or what I know now, and learning so much. And so my heart with this job is just full, because every day I get to share with people what I've learned, and having lived the experience as a caregiver when I didn't know that I was a caregiver. and to look back and put those pieces together, the mystery of what was happening at the time that I didn't know with what I know now, and to be able to fill in the gaps and almost cathartically give to others, the pieces of information of things that I would do had I known. And so it's been very fulfilling, and I'm so fortunate to be in the position that I'm in now with the Brain Injury Network. So I wanted to address, so CTE is chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And so encephalitis, if you know what that is, it's like swelling of the brain. And so encephalopathy then is a state of being swollen, and it's chronic, and the traumatic part means it's from being hit. And CTE develops over time, and it's from those repetitive head injuries that don't necessarily end in result in a loss of consciousness. So some of the ways to get CTE are the way that with our screening process, we tell people, did you ever have a time where you went through an abusive relationship as a child or even as an adult? And we do work with a lot of people in our network that are dealing with some after effects of being abused for a long time. We have a couple of agencies that help battered women, get reestablished. And so I was able to recently share with them about that piece that brain injury plays in their struggle to recover fully. And so giving them that piece of information is really useful. And then because they deal with the depression and all of the things that come after it and don't always know why. So that's one way to get brain injuries. Sports is another. The military, I know military is dealing with a lot and a lot of the progress they've made. They talk about PTSD, but it's those repetitive blasts that often are contributing to what's happening with their depression and what they're dealing with. That's one way. And then so the chronic traumatic encephalopathy, then with that swelling, the goal is to get that swelling down. So if you have the knowledge that you might have CTE, because you can't be tested for it while you're alive at this point, they're getting closer to getting to that point. But with that piece, knowing that you have suspected CTE, if you have the symptoms and you know that you had a history of repetitive head injuries and possibly some loss of consciousness, getting that inflammation down is really important. And as a family legacy member, with Concussion Legacy Foundation, my husband's pathology report was done through colleagues there. And so we are legacy family members. And so we get to, get in on some of that leading edge research that the doctors are doing there when they are looking at the brains of NFL players and other athletes and other populations. And they actually recommend a Mediterranean diet. So if you think that you're dealing with, any type of post-concussion syndrome or suspected CTE, or even just, a TBI, getting on a Mediterranean diet to get the inflammation down is really key. And getting some therapeutic doses of fish oil that have lots of DHA, more than the EPA. It's just really important and can be really pivotal when it comes to sleep issues, mood issues, and clearing up your thoughts. So that's where that swelling of the brain, that's what that piece means with CTE and the disease of CTE. And then Alzheimer's, so that's also inflammatory, but they don't always, it doesn't scream, fix me like the behaviors of CTE until it's quite advanced. I'd say for everyone, who doesn't want to have a healthy brain? So, obviously everybody could benefit from all of those measures, but, and then, so CTE though, I will tell you with the diagnostic process, what they're doing right now is they're able to say, well, you have suspected CTE, and I would only trust, doctors that are actually working with research with CTE to make even that diagnosis. Um, but what they're doing is they're looking for blood markers of tau, and that's a deposit in the brain. The way I describe it is if you were to, put your hands out kind of like jazz hands, that's like a neuron, a brain neuron. And there's a little string attaching that goes from, end to end. And with CTE, when you get an impact, that little string snaps and it curls back into the neuron. And if you rest the brain, it has a chance to regenerate, especially in children. But it's that rest that matters the most to get everything regrown and to make those compensatory, connections. So, but if you get another head injury and it doesn't get a chance to regrow, well, then it creates more scar tissue and it starts to displace, and it's a plaquey scar tissue, it starts to displace brain tissue. And that's why if you watch the movie Concussion and you see Iron Mike's brain, you get to see kind of his slides that they look at after he has died and they've identified chronic traumatic encephalopathy. It's almost like he has holes in his brain. And I think they've looked at some of the other athletes and been able to say, like look at the holes in the brain from the CTE. So after death, they take slices of the brain and look at it from different angles. And that's the only way that they're able to truly, truly diagnose it. And they have to rule out Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Lewy body, ALS, and Alzheimer's. I think I said all of them, or maybe I said one twice. But they have to rule all of those out and then look at the parts of the brain that still are showing the tau deposits that are only evident with CTE. So that's really the diagnostic process right now. And I know that there are some MRI angles that can see it, but it's certain newer machines. I'm not positive which ones it is. So that's still where we are. It's I think in the next 5 years they're going to be close to it, but we said that 5 years ago too. It's getting there. So what I want to do is fill in the blanks for you, because I don't know who all of you are in the audience today here at the live webinar. I want to scoot a couple things out of the way here so I can look and see if you have questions, and if you want clarification about, the process of what it looked like when Greg was alive, or, any type of clarification on CTE itself, or yeah, whatever you would like to ask, I'm open to. I just wanted to give you a big overview of where I came from and how I got here and what I do now, and then fill in the blanks for you if you like. So any questions, just go ahead and put those in the chat. And let's see here. And Courtney too, you've heard my story before, so if you wanted to ask questions too, if you see any details that of my story, if you want me to clarify or expand on, I sure can.
I'll just make a comment. I was fortunate enough to hear this presentation, I think it was a couple of years ago at NASHA, a National Brain Injury Conference, and it's blessed me just as much as it did the first time today. I think the most powerful presentations at any conference, any webinar, are those that are lived experience. So I just want to say thank you for sharing and blessing us with your family story today. It does look, I'll put myself on mute. It does look like we just got a question in the chat box.
Oh, yep. So how is CTE best managed? So I can look at that from a couple different points of view. If I knew then what I know now, and personally, how would I do it if it were to happen again today? So and it depends on the relationship you have with the person that is showing symptoms. So if it's a spouse, you're going to handle it one way. If it's a parent, a child, a coworker, whatever it is, or an employee, you're going to look at it from different angles. And so, but if it was you yourself that you are suspecting, gosh, that could be the case, first thing you're going to do is try to get the inflammation down. And the other thing, so getting all of your injuries on a timeline is really important, and sharing that with someone, because then before you start to forget, you want to document your injuries and the symptoms. So I've created a timeline that I utilize with people that at our homeless shelter and in other situations when we do a screening. And it folds into a business card sized little thing that you can keep in a wallet. And so we open it up, and I go through symptoms with people and have them put, or I go through ways to hit your head, and we put that on the top part of this timeline. And then, like, let's say they were diagnosed with anxiety and depression. We'll put that diagnosis on the timeline too. Or let's say, a divorce happened because there was some volatility going on. We'll kind of trail back. When did that start? And put that on the timeline. And so there are little short list of symptoms here. And when you see the whole picture of injuries versus the onset of symptoms, that can be very, very helpful. So the knowledge part, like knowing your brain injury, knowing when it started, can be helpful in managing symptoms, because then when things come up, the first thing you ask yourself is this brain injury related? And that's really, really important to know when you're dealing with brain injury symptoms, but also not letting those be misdiagnosed with as mental health issues, and then being improperly medicated. So the knowledge part is really important, but then pulling somebody into that picture to help see it as well, and remind you, well, that could just be brain injury. Then the diet, I would say the number one thing is to get diet under control. So, doing anti-inflammatory dietary things like that Mediterranean diet, some fish oil, but then abstaining from alcohol is huge. So I would say those are the most important, and just keeping track. And then how far back would you go on the timeline? Birth. So I start here. If you can, let me go here. So this is birthday, and then this is most recent head injury. So what I tell people is, when I'm presenting, I say, okay, so if you're 33 or 30, you're going to put 15 in this circle, just as age indicators. And then, so then at age 15, if you remember, okay, I was, I played football and had a couple of concussions. Well, then you know that those are kind of a little bit after 15. And so it's your timeline, but it's something that you can take to a neuropsychologist if you're going to go try to get some diagnostic things done. And they do appreciate the timeline. So because at birth, you could have had some issues, like you could have birth trauma, you could have had, oxygen issues, or I know there's a gal that I'm working with, and I've known the family since this little gal was a little girl. She's 26 or 27 now. And she had a brain tumor, a benign tumor, removed at age 14. But the parents said, no, the issues started, earlier than that. And then I did have to probe a little bit and say, did she ever fall off of any equipment, any baby equipment or swing set? And they said, oh my gosh, there were twice. There was once she was completely knocked out at age 4. And the family had adopted 2 kids at the same time. And it was then we identified, but it took some talking and really probing, where she said, you know what? The mom said, that's when the daughter kind of started to have learning disabilities and wasn't on track. She was on track with the sibling that they adopted. But then there was a difference after that. And so to trail way back and say, yep, there was a swing set incident, and there was a knockout, and then there was the brain tumor. So, you go back as far as you need to. And then let's see here, the book. Okay. So yes, So my book, I have not been able to get it on Amazon yet because Amazon wants to print it apparently and send it out. I haven't had time to check that any deeper, but I have, you know, 1,500, 1,800 copies of the book here. And they are $10 each because that's what will cover paying the illustrator. And so yes, it's not that I'm making money on the book. I'm just trying to recoup my costs. And so yes, and if you get, you know, a group of them, then you save on shipping. But yes, on my website, bumpedhishead.com is where I have orders set up for it. And then yes, oh good, yes, you've got some resources on there. Yes.
What about the wonderful timeline? Did you mention, is that something that folks can also find or order?
So if you, okay, so I made these through with North Dakota Brain Injury Network.
Okay.
Um, and so if you, gosh, let's see here. So they are branded for my job now, but I could, I mean, and you know, in the book, okay, in the book, there is a timeline. It's just a small one. And it is right on, it's right after the symptoms. Okay, there, can you see on the bottom of this page? It's just not as detailed as this, but if if there's a note or anything, or if you can email me, if you order a book, you can request a timeline. I can throw one in there for sure. Um, and then, oh, also, little clarification. So, you know, the part of the book where it says, his brain bumps added up to 44, but this one was a big one. It broke his brain a whole lot more. A lot of people will say, did he really have 44? And so we don't know. That's one thing that we don't know. His football number was 44. And he had an uncanny resemblance to Brian Bosworth, whose number was also 44. So it's, and he had a tattoo of 44. So it's just a number that I put in here because it was pertinent for us. And then when you get to that assessment, I use it again in the back where it's 44 ways you may have bumped your head. And it's just to help you with that, oh gosh, where do we go? Yeah, where it's to help with that, just to prompt things, just like with the little gal that the parents didn't realize that you didn't think that about being bumped off of the swing at age 4. They wouldn't have thought of it if we weren't just really, really going through everything. So there's 44 examples, just there are more than 44 ways to hit your head, and then also 44 symptoms of a broken brain. And there are more, you know, so it's just things to help prompt. There are 44 prompts, if that's helpful.
Shannon, as far as your email address or contacting you, do you want me to put your email address in the chat box, the one that I've used to communicate with you? Is that one okay?
That would be good. That's the one that would get to me the quickest. Yeah,
Okay.
the quickest and easiest. Yeah. I do have the bumped his head book at gmail.com, but the UND at UND.edu, that is probably the fastest. Yeah. Oh, and you've got bumped with a T on there. Whoops. BUMP without the T. Yeah. BUMPED, his head book.com. There you go. Yeah.
Perfect. Are there any other questions for Shannon? Thank you again, Shannon. I can't say that enough, especially sharing your family story with all of us. It means a lot.
Thanks. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
see any showing up in there. I do want to remind everybody that this was recorded. Thank you for allowing us to do that so we can share it to our YouTube library. That should be available within the next probably 1 to 2 days. If you've missed a part of this, if you want to share it, we'll also share the link on social media. So again, Shannon, thank you so much for carving time out of your day to be here, and for all of you for attending. I did drop the presenter evaluation into the chat box again. If you haven't done that, please take a moment to provide Shannon with some helpful feedback. Yes, and a resounding thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Have a good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Bye-bye.